Welcome to Behind the Pages Conversations with the Leadership Authors. I am Dr. Julie Pham. I'm the founder and CEO of Curiosity Base, and this is the series Behind the Pages, is where we get to have conversations with a diverse range of leadership authors. So last year, Curiosity Base, we started creating these leadership book lists to promote underrepresented leadership perspectives. In honor of Pride Month, we have a special guest, Bernadette Smith, today. So this on the screen, this is our list from last year, which had over 100 books. We are actually currently updating our list. And so if you have some recommendations for us, please do put that. You can email us and you can also put that in the chat. Our new list will come out in a couple of weeks. And I know, Bernadette, your book will be featured right in that banner right there.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. And so we are a big believer that to enrich how you lead, you have to expand who you read. There's so many different authors out there, and all of these perspectives are important. So today I get to have a conversation with Bernadette Smith in our Behind the Pages Conversations with Leadership Authors. And Bernadette is the founder and CEO of the Equality Institute, which she will tell us more about. And we get to talk about her book, Inclusive 360, Proven Solutions for an Equitable Organization. As you can see, Bernadette, I really did read your book. So, and we will also get a chance to have some audience questions today. So if you can actually put your questions into the comment section as they come up. So Bernadette, thank you so much for joining us.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes.
And happy Pride, everyone. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. So Bernadette, I'm a historian, so I always like to go in the past. And what were the first question I want to ask is, who were your role models for leadership when you were growing up?
We were talking before we came live, and I said that I hadn't really thought about this question before, and I hadn't really come up with this story before. So this is the first time I'm telling this story. So back when I was a little kid, my dad's best friend, his name was Guy, and he was part owner of the local pharmacy. And he worked some nights. And so after work, he often would stop by my parents' house on the way home for a drink before he got home. And so Guy was sort of a regular fixture in my life. But on the days in which he wasn't working at the pharmacy, or I guess maybe the days he didn't have a day shift, he would drive his beat up, paint spattered pickup truck and volunteer to paint at retirement communities for low income folks. And he just believed that a coat of paint provided dignity. And so it was his form of meditation, his form of service. And he was always walking around with those paint spattered glasses, and it was just a complete character. And, thinking about Guy, what I learned from him was the power of service and humility and giving other folks dignity. And Guy also was a donor to Habitat for Humanity, and he introduced me to that organization, which is where I really started to develop my own leadership skills. So that's another story. But yeah, so props to Guy for setting me on that path of service.
Oh, Bernadette, I love that story. Are you still in contact with Guy? Have you ever told him how he modeled service for you?
I don't think so. He's been passed for quite a while now. And I don't know that I ever did tell him that. I don't know that I had sort of put the pieces together. But no, he's been gone for quite a while, unfortunately.
Bernadette, thank you for sharing that story. It just makes me think about how these early impressions that we have of leadership that maybe we don't even call it leadership. We're just, doing good things. And also, if we are being influenced by other people, then that means that we are actually also influencing people as well in ways that we don't even realize.
Yeah.
And so those acts of service, that the painting, going to paint, which is, by the way, as someone who's going through house renovations right now, that's a big deal. That's a great act of service.
It really is.
So I know that you started your career actually as a wedding planner for the LGBTQ community. And I had to tell you, when I was growing up, my mom had a wedding shop. So
wow.
I read those really super thick wedding brides magazines. And so when I saw that, I was just, oh, I get that. That is a lot of work. And so, and then you built the Quality Institute. So how did you go from wedding planning to Equality Institute?
All right, so here's here's the story, the long and winding road. So at my heart, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a visionary in the sense that I can see sort of the gaps in the market and the opportunities. And back when I was in my mid-20s, I was planning I was planning events for a nonprofit and living in Boston when Massachusetts became the first state in the country to have marriage equality for same-sex couples. So I was spending a lot of time going down to the state house and seeing all these couples fighting for their rights because they were trying to change the Constitution to ban same-sex marriage. Anyway, long story short, it came into being and I just saw all these couples and I was like, someone's got to plan these weddings. It might as well be me.
You saw business opportunity.
Yes, but my vision was to be an activist wedding planner, to be an advocate for couples navigating a very traditional, very heteronormative wedding industry. Those brides magazines that you're talking about from back in the day, up until a couple of years ago, you were not really seeing same-sex couples in those magazines, right? And the wedding industry is so bride and groom centric. And so my vision was to be an advocate, and I planned a lot of amazing weddings. As time went on, I ended up writing 3 books all about LGBTQ weddings, started speaking and training because I realized I could have a much bigger impact on the industry as a whole, beyond just the couples that I was working with, if I educated other folks in the industry. So I did a lot of speaking, training, wedding, hospitality, and tourism industry on LGBTQ inclusion, and not even just training, but, helping them, consulting with their processes and all of that as well. And so, eventually, as time went on, I was planning weddings in New York City, planning 6-figure weddings, feeling like, oh, wait, where's the activist wedding planner part of all this? Right? Definitely felt disconnected from my why, from my sense of purpose. And, got divorced and essentially kind of blew up my life. Really is what happened, and eventually evolved my business away from those industries, retired as a wedding planner, and evolved my business into diversity, equity, and inclusion work more broadly, and into really supporting all different types of industries and all different types of businesses. So it's been an evolution, but the common thread was really about creating a sense of safety. So I really want to create a sense of safety, not just for all employees everywhere, but all customers everywhere. And I think that there's a lot of work to be done to do that. So that's what I'm really passionate about.
I did not realize you had already written 3 books on weddings.
Yes.
Wow. Before
Yes.
So I wanna ask the difference of writing I wanna hear it from you, the difference of writing this wedding book, the wedding books, and this one, how it helped you prepare to write Inclusive 360, and then also what inspired you to write Inclusive 360.
Yeah. So, having written 3 books before, I knew that I could do it. Right. And so having that track record really gave me the confidence to just sort of bite the bullet and do it. And writing the first book was the hardest one because it's the first and you don't know what you're doing. And it was self-published and it just was a bit messy. Let's just say that, imperfect. Even though I used a hybrid service, it was still imperfect. The second book was picked up by a mainstream publisher, and basically they picked up the first book and re-released it. So there was a heavy edit. We added a lesbian specific slant to it, and we re-released that one. And then the third book was specifically for business owners. So it was educating businesses and hotels and all the folks in the industry about LGBTQ inclusion. And that really came about from a whole series of blog posts and a lot of the writing I'd been doing kind of on an ongoing level. So on an ongoing basis. So, that was sort of the journey with those books. And I never really invested in any of those scenarios in the marketing and the release. And I just sort of kind of hid, because here's the thing. I never really cared all that much about weddings, you know?
Mm.
I was there for the activism part. I
Mhm.
was there to make a difference. I happened to be good. I happened to be like a pretty decent planner, pretty organized. Like I was definitely completely solid and good at my job, but it also was not my passion. And so when those books came out, I was not, doing a lot of heavy promoting of them at
Mm.
all. So that was something that really shifted for this fourth book.
Mm.
And honestly, the reason that I wrote this fourth book, the main reason, if I have to be completely honest, is because it was my way of getting over my imposter syndrome.
Mm.
Because when I evolved my business away from weddings, I was like, you know what? I don't work in corporate. I came from weddings. People might think weddings are shallow. I kind of think weddings are shallow. They're not going to trust me. And so for me, this book was about saying, you know what? I have something really clear to say, and I'm going to say it. And I'm really, really proud of the book.
Wow, that is so surprising because in reading the book, it was just, oh, this is so practical. It's so, they're so credible. I mean, I never would have guessed that you actually wrote this book to, to process and overcome your imposter syndrome. So,
I mean, that was really the core reason, but there were a lot of other reasons as well. But absolutely, and it taught me a lot about myself, and I'm just really proud of what I created. I really am. It's been a couple of years, almost 2 years now, and I still think it's a great book. I still
mhm.
really like my book.
Yes, yes, and I agree. It's so relevant. So let's hear you read from the book because this is behind the pages, and so we try to simulate what a book talk would be like. And so inviting the author to do a little bit of a book reading here. And by the way, audience, if you're thinking of questions, please do put them in the comment section. So, Bernadette.
Okay, so here's the little secret. Here's my book. This is my partner's book. Sometimes she does LinkedIn lives and stuff, and so we do a little book swap. But here you go, promoting my partner's book right there.
Nice. It's a twofer.
That's
Can
right.
you zoom in a little closer?
Sure. How's that? Do you
Okay,
see it
great.
okay? Okay, so this is from page 106 of Inclusive 360. My own advantages. I didn't invent slavery. I wasn't there on the plantation. I'm not even from the South. But I benefited from slavery. It kept white people in charge, and my white family never experienced the trauma of seeing proud Confederate flags and Robert E. Lee statues on display, despite what those images represent. I wasn't even born in the 1930s. I hadn't even heard of redlining until 20 years ago. It's not my fault Black people were prevented from buying homes because banks wouldn't offer loans when the government labeled Black neighborhoods as risky investments. But I still benefited from this because my family members were all able to buy homes, and those homes became investments in our future. Later, when I bought my first home, it was in a gentrifying neighborhood and it was from a Black woman about to go into foreclosure. I benefited from redlining. In the 1980s, I was just a kid. I didn't know anyone doing crack or cocaine. It's not my fault the prison sentence for crack, a primarily poor Black drug, was 100 times more strict than the prison sentence for cocaine, a primarily rich white drug, even though the drugs are from the same plant. It's not my fault that this led to millions of young Black men in jail, effectively enslaving them and forcing them to leave their families behind. But I benefited from the war on drugs because cops were so focused on arresting young Black men that they let me go when, at the age of 19, I ran a red light with 6 people in my Chrysler, which reeked of marijuana. I've never worked for the electoral system or any government. I've never been a poll worker. I've never had any trouble voting. It's not my fault thousands of Black voters have trouble voting. It's not my fault their names are removed from voter roll or their polling places close early or they're given the wrong ballot or their state doesn't allow felons to vote. But I benefited from voter suppression because it didn't happen to me. This meant that I never once questioned my ability to participate fully. in a democracy. I had a Black girlfriend once who I'll refer to as M. She came with me to my aunt's restaurant in upstate New York. We sat at the bar. She got some dirty looks. I didn't notice. She felt unsafe. I didn't notice. As we drove away, she told me what she experienced. We almost broke up because I simply didn't get it. We did break up eventually, but I wasn't the one giving dirty looks. It wasn't my fault, right? Wrong. I benefited from never knowing how she felt. In fact, I benefit every day from feeling safe almost everywhere because most people, especially those in power, look like me. I benefit every day from not being followed around stores or having my resume ignored because of my name. I benefit every day because my professional qualifications are not questioned due to my race. I benefit every day because there are grocery stores with fresh produce in my neighborhood. I benefit every day because I'm not 2.5 times more likely to be killed by the police. I benefit every day because I'm white. That's white privilege, which has been built up from centuries of white supremacy ideology interwoven within every system in this country. Slavery was not my fault, but I benefited, so it's my responsibility. Redlining is not my fault, but I benefit, so it's my responsibility. Voter suppression is not my fault, but I benefit, so it's my responsibility. What happened with M was not my fault, but I was ignorant, so it's my responsibility. I didn't invent these or any of the many other systems of inequality, but I benefit from them. Therefore, it's my responsibility to help dismantle them. If you are a white person like me, I hope you will see that racial equity is all of our responsibility. It's unreasonable to expect those who suffer from our systems of white supremacy to do the work to dismantle them.
Thank you, Bernadette. I really appreciate how you are so specific in all of these different ways that white privilege can show up, because there are many things, we don't think about. So, when you were writing that part, was that difficult or was that easy?
I actually wrote that a little bit earlier in the year. I think I wrote that in 2020, and I finished the book later that year or early the next year. And so I had it written, and it was really about whether to include it. And
Mm,
so I wrote it as an essay. I published it on LinkedIn, and got a lot of positive feedback. And I decided to include it in the book because I think that a lot of us white folks just don't get it. We don't fully understand. And so for me, it also was a way to break up the book from being like totally practical. This is
mhm,
just more of a reflection piece. And when I wrote it the first time, it was something that I was just sort of like watering the plants in the backyard or something, and the words started to appear,
mm.
which doesn't happen too often. So I will take it when it does. Those inspiration bubbles.
Yeah, when those inspiration bubbles come, when the flow comes, because
Yeah.
sometimes there's that writer's block, right? And so it's just,
Mhm.
when the flow comes, you just gotta flow with it.
Oh, love that
So
flow.
yeah, so that is a reflection piece, and the book is filled with, as you just said, all of these best practices, these tips, and one of them that I appreciate is this ARC framework that you have. Can you share what that means and elaborate?
Yeah, absolutely. So ARC stands for Ask, Respect, Connect. And it's a tool that I created to really get clarity in any situation. And there are 3 different contexts of the ARC method that I talk about in the book. But we'll just focus on the last 2. So the to get clarity in any situation, especially when we're talking about people who are different from us, or we're not quite sure what's going on, or we don't quite understand how to relate to people who are different. Approach from a place of curiosity. So you ask, but ask with curiosity, not confrontation. Be gentle in how you ask. Sometimes ask permission to ask. There are a few different types of rules of what not to ask, but we're always going to start with the A, the ask. And then we move on to the R, which is respect. So we're not interrupting, we're not dismissing, we're being respectful, we're not listening to respond. We're just being present. And then we always end with C, which is connect. And connect is about tying it all together. And sometimes it means we're validating someone, or we're paraphrasing what we heard. And these ARC method conversations, they don't have to be long or complicated. They can be really simple, but we just have to start with a gentle question. So the book provides a lot of different prompts and ARC method conversation starters. There are also more on the equalityinstitute.com website. And the other version of the ARC is really about calling folks out on microaggressions. So as an ally, or calling folks in. So as an ally, if you hear something that's offensive or potentially offensive, or a microaggression or something that's on the line, you can, ask gently, like, hey, what did you mean by that? And really sort of approach from, again, this place of curiosity, not confrontation, and prompting some reflection, because what I really believe is that most of us have good intentions and we don't always get it right. So the ARC method is to kind of make it easier to get it right.
So ARC, ask, respect, connect.
Mm-hmm.
From someone, as you know, I deeply appreciate curiosity, and so I really appreciate that first, that ask, and how the tip of ask. Sometimes it just starts with asking for permission.
Mm-hmm.
So now you also talk about covering and the negative impact of not being your authentic self at work.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually share a very personal example of when you were hiding the fact that you were going through a divorce. So can you share what is sharing personal information? What does it have to do with fostering belonging at work?
Yeah. So in my story, at the time of my divorce, I was a wedding planner, and there were some of my clients that I was particularly close to. Some of them were people that I know kind of saw me as like a role model of like a cool gay family, and because I have a son, and so I just kind of felt like I couldn't be open about that process of getting divorced, of that whole thing, with most of my clients. I just didn't want to kind of rain on their parade as well. So there were definitely plenty of times in which, they would ask me, different people would ask me, what are you and Jen up to this weekend? Or what are the three of you doing? Those kinds of questions. And I would just sort of dodge them. I would just really kind of space out, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And I made some mistakes on a contract. I spaced out during meetings, and I just wasn't really fully present. I definitely didn't give my best because I just was having just such a hard time in my personal life. And, these are people who I shared, dinner with. And sometimes my ex-wife came too.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it was just a really hard time. And honestly, I don't know that I ever really truly felt like my authentic self the whole time I was in the wedding industry. It definitely, there was really not many. There were very few people who looked like me in that industry. So, so covering at work really can prevent folks from really showing up authentically, being themselves, being fully present. It means that it manifests itself in being distracted, being less productive, and really just not giving your best. It can mean that we're not sharing our big ideas. It can mean that we're not speaking up if we witness mistakes. And it really means that we're not contributing to a psychologically safe team environment. And psychological safety is a key driver of team performance, and covering is a barrier to that.
So Bernadette, what do you say about people who are just there's just TMI? Like, I don't want to know too much information, right? There's sometimes that it can go overboard. So
yeah, I would say, let's not unpack all of our stuff. There's a line. I think we're all capable of sharing like 15 or 20 seconds worth of the story without, unpacking all of it. I can tell you a story about my divorce in about 30 seconds. And chances are, if we were having a cup of coffee together, you might say something back that, is a little bit vulnerable or a little bit sharing or somehow trying to connect or relate to me. Right. And so I know that now. But I didn't know it then. And so I think the line is really about how much you share and kind of having a decent sense of personal boundaries about it. So, just sharing a bit, but you don't have to go too deep if that's not the relationship you have with the people on your team.
It's like the 30-second rule, because sometimes people go in lots and lots of detail. And yet, I mean, the fact is you were hiding the fact that you were divorced and just saying, "Hey, I'm going through a divorce." That actually is enough to not cover,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I appreciate that. And then people
Yeah.
can then decide if they want to ask you more or not.
Exactly right. And the other thing is, if we're just sort of spaced out and we don't tell them why, or we're not like fully present and we don't tell them why, they're going to make up their own ideas about
Mhm.
what's going on with us. We might not really like those, what their theories are.
Yeah, that, "Oh, we don't care about the work," or "We're not committed," or "We're not capable."
That's right.
Mhm, mhm. I've definitely been guilty of that, just and then I find out what's really going on because 'cause I've got all of these stories going on in my head.
Exactly.
So, audience, I'm just gonna invite, if you have any questions, please put them into the chat. And now we're gonna go into talking about the behind the scenes, behind the pages. What was your favorite part about writing this book, Bernadette?
My favorite part about writing the book was that this is going to sound strange. Can I answer as far as like the marketing process? Because that was
Yeah.
actually my favorite part.
Oh, really? Even though
Yeah,
you
it
didn't do it for
was.
any of your other books?
That's right.
Huh.
This time it was my favorite part. Um, yeah, because I had created something I was really proud of, and I hired a company to help me market the book. And what they challenged me to do was to reach deep into my network, past and present, and ask people for help.
Mm.
To send a survey to my newsletter folks and ask them for their feedback and their help. And what was the most beautiful thing for me is how people showed up. There was an amazing sense of support and love and generosity, and it was amazing. And so I never would have had that sense of fulfillment had I not asked for help. And let me tell you, when my marketing person said, "Hey, you have to make a 60-minute, 60-second video for 300 people and send them with a personal video for each one and ask for help," I was like, no way. And I was completely overwhelmed and intimidated, but I just started doing it bit by bit. And maybe it
Wait,
wasn't 300, but it was a
okay.
lot of videos.
Individual videos for
Yes.
wow.
Hey, I know it's been a while since we talked, but I really remember this time that we did X, and not X, but we did whatever it was. And yeah, this is what I'm up to. Are you willing to help? Like videos like that. And it was a beautiful thing. It was a
Mhm.
great feeling of love that I received. And so just a tremendous amount of gratitude. And it became a bestseller. So it was a really cool experience.
That just when you said marketing, it's like usually people hate the marketing part, and yet what you're really describing is bringing people along your journey and doing that outreach and doing that reconnection with
Mm-hmm.
people. Because I've also found personally when I was working on my book that a lot of people dream of writing a book and they never do. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people, so I just want to cheer you on. And
Yes.
you reached out to these hundreds of people and they were just, yeah, Bernadette, I'm going to be cheering you on.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you. What was your least favorite part?
Um, my least favorite part was trying to figure out how I was going to bring it into the world. So whether I
Mm,
was going to go with a traditional publisher or self-publish, I had an agent from before, and she had just sold a DEI book, and she really wasn't interested in trying to sell another one because that took a while. And so, so I decided to go the self-publishing route, and sort of that process is, you know, it's it's a pain. It's
mhm.
cumbersome. So I would say that's the least favorite part.
So it was actually like making the decision about it.
Yeah,
That was
like
good.
making the decision and then sort of, kind of I ended up managing a lot of that process myself because I'd kind of done it before. And so I was like, you know what, I know how to do this.
Mhm.
And so I was probably a little bit overly hands-on and caused me stress. So that not only the decision, but then sort of the process as well.
Mm. Thanks, Bernadette. So, what advice would you give to someone who is considering writing a book?
My advice is to just start writing in general. So just get in the habit of writing. So whether it's something that you set aside a time at the end of every day, which is what I try to do, at the end of every workday at 4:30, I get a reminder it's time to write, and so I try to write every workday and just sort of reflect on the day or reflect on a conversation that I had with a client or whatever it happens to be. Um, so that's I'd say just sort of get in the habit of writing because it's really easy to make a lot of excuses not
Mhm.
to do it. So build a habit and just stick with it.
So, the advice is just write.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Yeah, I told that really quick story earlier about how I, got some inspiration while I was gardening. That's not how it really happens. Inspiration comes when you're doing the work.
Mhm. Mhm. So, what are some leadership authors that inspire you?
One of probably my favorite leadership book from the past couple of years is called Unleashed: The
Mm.
Unapologetic Leader's Guide to Empowering Everyone Around You by Frances Fry and Anne Morris, who are a married lesbian couple. And Frances is a Harvard Business School professor. So it's a really fantastic book. It's very accessible, very practical, just a really great read.
Mm. I'm gonna have to add that to our list if we don't have that yet. So for the audience out there, please check out this book, and also we're gonna pop up a QR code so that you can check it out and look at the website for this as well. And also, Bernadette, I know that you have a podcast of your own, a LinkedIn Live of your own. Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, so my habit, I have a habit, discipline, maybe I should say, of a weekly newsletter called Five Things, bringing good vibes to DEI. And so Five Things is all about celebrating what's going right. So I find stories every week of things that I think are inspiring, that bring me joy, bring me hope, and I share them with the world on a newsletter that goes out on Saturdays. And then on Mondays, I am joined by a special guest, and that guest and I chat on LinkedIn Live about the newsletter. We just talk about those five stories, and we take about 15 minutes, and it's just a fun, upbeat way to start your week with some good vibes in DEI. So that LinkedIn Live becomes a podcast. So you can find Five Things in 15 minutes on any podcast platform that you're looking for. Maybe best to search my name or Good Vibes in DEI, but you'll find it. Five Things in 15 minutes. Thank you. I love it. It's just, um, it's really, it brings me joy to create this every week. And I have great conversations with folks. And I'd say it's probably the single most important thing I do every week.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. I know that I really enjoyed listening to it because it's just in this work of DI, sometimes it can be, oh, this is what's wrong. We're doing this wrong. We're not going far enough. And yet with that, it's just like, but look at all these people who are actually who are trying their best. We're trying our best and are actually making some progress. And that you find all of these stories. I really appreciate that. And it's fast too. It's like 15 minutes of inspiration.
Yeah,
So I so
thanks.
appreciate that you do that because I feel like we get the opposite message much more of the time.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's what I try to do in even in this work is to find the white space, message differently because honestly, and this is very authentic. I am an optimist. I am a really positive person, and I am definitely someone who really likes to lead from that point of view. And so all of this Five Things work that I do is really just it's a labor of love, and I'm really glad it resonates with folks. Thank you, Julie. I'm glad it resonates with you.
Thank you so much, Bernadette. Again, please check out this book. And now I also want to, as we're winding down, just want to make sure that we stay in touch. And thank you for everyone out there who engaged in this conversation. And to remember to subscribe to the Curiosity Based newsletter so that you can stay up to date with our next session of Behind the Pages. And also, you will, when you subscribe to that newsletter, you will be the first to get the link to our new updated list as well, which I know is going to have over 100 books as well. So thank you.
Thank you for including me on the list.